We are all familiar with the colonies of the German Empire, Namibia, Cameroon, Tanzania, and so on. But there were actually colonies even before the unification of the German states. The Elector of Brandenburg-Prussia began to conquer land in Africa and the Caribbean as early as the year 1600. He was infected by the other colonial powers' thirst for discovery, armed a navy and entered the poker game for lands far from home. In this video, we therefore take a look at the early, often forgotten German colonies. How were they conquered, how were they used, and how did the colonial empire collapse again? I answer all these questions in today's video. The first Europeans to establish bases in Africa were the Portuguese. They established an efficient network of forts and supply stations for their ships on their way to Asia. However, the other European powers naturally did not want to leave the Portuguese the sole monopoly on the lucrative Asian trade. So the Dutch, the British, the Swedes and the Danes followed suit, establishing trading bases on the coast of Africa. When the same nations also conquered colonies in America, the very lucrative triangular trade began to establish itself bit by bit. And the Elector of Brandenburg-Prussia was keen to participate in this trade. A brief reminder, from the year 1618, the Hohenzollerns ruled Brandenburg and Prussia in a personal union, and from the year 1701, this became the Kingdom of Prussia, which was later to unite the German states. Brandenburg-Prussia was a classic land power, which was a problem as a fleet was needed to conquer colonies. The then Elector Frederick William therefore began to charter frigates from the Dutch and financed the construction of his own ships. A small navy grew up, but it achieved considerable success. It was deployed for the first time in a war with Sweden, in which successful sieges were conducted against Stettin, Stralsund and Rügen. Spurred on by this success, the Elector began to reach for more distant goals. Expeditions to West Africa began, during which protection treaties were concluded with local rulers. In the year 1682, the first official colony was founded, Gross Friedrichsburg in present-day Ghana. A fortress was built and trading houses were established. Colonies were also established in other parts of Africa. From the year 1685, for example, in Argan, an island off present-day Mauritania, and from the year 1700 also in Ouidah in present-day Benin. What was still missing, however, to carry out the triangular trade desired by the Elector was a colony in the Caribbean. A treaty was therefore concluded with Denmark, more precisely with the Danish West Indies Guinean Company. The latter leased Brandenburg-Prussia part of the Caribbean island of St. Thomas, on which the Elector was allowed to trade freely in slaves. St. Thomas was one of the Antilles Islands, today it is part of the American Virgin Islands. A few years later, Crab Island, which is now part of Puerto Rico, was also annexed. Frederick William was therefore very proud, as he had put all his plans into practice and now had a colonial empire on 3 continents. Lively trade began in the colonies, with commodities such as rubber, ivory, gold and salt being traded. However, the brutal slave trade remained the most lucrative. It is estimated that between 10,000 and 30,000 Africans were deported to America as slaves from the colonies of Brandenburg-Prussia. Despite the brief financial prosperity of the colonies, a relatively rapid decline followed over the next few decades. The main reason for this was that Frederick William's successors did not share his passion for colonies and the navy and turned their attention back to Europe and the establishment of a strong land army. Particularly after the founding of the Kingdom of Prussia in the year 1701, the colonies far from home were increasingly forgotten and were dissolved or sold. For example, the leases in the Caribbean were not renewed and the African possessions were sold to the Dutch West India Company. And for the next few centuries, Prussia made no further attempts to conquer colonies. The main reason given for this was that owning them would make Prussia too dependent on the powerful naval powers.